You probably have a blue and yellow box of it sitting on a shelf in your utility room right now. 20 mule team, $2, maybe 3, and the bugs eating your tomatoes, the ants marching across your kitchen counter, the cockroaches your neighbor swears she doesn't have, the fleas riding in on the dog, the slugs turning your hostas into Swiss cheese. Every single one of them can be wiped out by 2 spoonfuls of that powder. Forever. Not for a week, not until the next rain. Forever. And the pest control industry, a $40 billion machine in this country alone, has no incentive in the world to tell you that. Stay with me because around the middle of this, I'm going to show you the exact 2-ingredient mix that took my neighbor's 20-year carpenter ant problem and ended it in one weekend for under $1. Not reduced it, ended it. But before I get into any of that, I need a favor. Drop your state in the comments. Just the state. That's it. Because the pests you're fighting in Georgia are not the pests I'm fighting up here. And I want to tailor what I tell you next week to where most of you actually live. I'll be honest with you, I spent close to 30 years doing this the expensive way. I had a chap come out every quarter, sprayed the foundation, sprayed the eaves, handed me an invoice for $140 and shook my hand. I remember standing on my back patio in the summer of 2011, watching him spray with a wasp landing on the rim of my coffee cup, not 6FT from where he just treated. That was the moment that something cracked for me. I just didn't know what to do about it yet. What I found out later the hard way by reading old agricultural bulletins and digging through university extension pages. Most folks never see is that the answer was already in my house. It had been in American houses since 1891, and somebody somewhere decided we shouldn't be reminded. So let's talk about what borax actually is, because if you understand this one thing, the rest of the video is going to click into place like a key in a lock. Borax is sodium tetraborate. It's a naturally occurring mineral. They scrape it out of dry lake beds in Boron, California, the same way they have since the 80s. The famous 20 mule teams that the box is named for, those were real. They hauled it out of Death Valley. It's a mineral. It's been on supermarket shelves in this country for over 130 years as a laundry booster. Your grandmother knew it. Your great-grandmother knew it. And somewhere between her generation and ours, the industry quietly stopped reminding us what else it does. Here is the science, and I want you to picture this clearly. An insect doesn't have skin like you and me. It has an exoskeleton, basically a hard shell on the outside and a gut on the inside that's incredibly sensitive. When an ant, a cockroach, a silverfish, a flea, any of these pests walks through borax powder, tiny grains stick to their legs. They groom themselves. They eat it. Once it's inside, the boron ion does 2 things at once. It chews through the lining of their stomach and it dehydrates them from the inside out. They cannot develop a resistance to it the way they can with modern pesticides because you can't evolve around being dried up. Penn State Extension has documented borat compounds maintaining effectiveness against German cockroaches when synthetic pesticides have lost ground year after year. Same insect, same population, the mineral keeps working, the chemicals stop. Now here is where the villain shows up because somebody is profiting from you not knowing this. A jug of name brand ant killer at the large DIY store runs you between $8 and $14. It contains, in many cases, less than 1% active ingredient. The rest is water and carrier. A box of borax, the same powder I'm talking about, costs around $3 and lasts the average household 2 to 3 years. You do the maths on what's been quietly taken out of your wallet over 30 years of home ownership. I did. I almost couldn't finish the calculation, but knowing it works isn't enough. You have to know how to use it because dumping a pile of white powder in the corner of your kitchen does almost nothing. The pests have to carry it home. So here's the recipe that ended every ant problem I've ever had. 1 cup of warm water, half a cup of sugar, 2 tablespoons of borax. Stir until it's dissolved. Soak cotton wool balls in it. Drop those cotton wool balls into shallow jar lids and set the lids wherever you see ants traveling. The sugar is the bait. The ants cannot resist it. The borax is the payload. They drink it. They carry it back to the colony. They feed it to the queen. And within about 7 to 10 days, the entire colony collapses. Not the ones you see. All of them. the ones underground you've never laid eyes on. The mistake almost everybody makes is using too much borax. More is not better. If you go heavier than about a 5% concentration, you kill the worker ants too fast, and they die before they make it back to the nest. The queen survives, lays more eggs, and you're right back where you started in 3 weeks. This is the part the cheap blog posts get wrong. You want them to live long enough to share the meal. And that brings me to the part I promised you. The thing that ended my neighbor's 20-year carpenter ant problem. Carpenter ants are different. They don't eat sugar the same way. They want protein and fat. So my neighbor, a retired millwright named Dale, who lives 2 doors down from me, mixed 2 tablespoons of borax with about a third of a cup of smooth peanut butter and a tablespoon of honey to bind it. He smeared little dollops of it on the squares of cardboard and tucked them up under his decking joists, behind his shed, along the sill plate in his underfloor void. Total cost, counting the peanut butter he already had open in the larder, was under $1. 3 weeks later, there wasn't a carpenter ant left on his property. That was 4 years ago. They have not come back. Dale had spent, by his own count, somewhere north of $9,000 on professional carpenter ant treatments over 2 decades. $9,000 for a problem, a jar of peanut butter, and a spoonful of laundry booster solved permanently. Now, I can already hear some of you thinking that's fine for somebody with a new place, but my house has been here 40 years. My garden is established. I've got mulch beds I'm not tearing up. I've got a vegetable patch I'm not nuking. Good. You shouldn't tear anything up. This works better on an established property, not worse. And I'll tell you why. An older home and an established garden have what a new build doesn't: defined pest highways. Ants follow the same scent trails for years. Cockroaches travel the same skirting boards. Slugs come out of the same shaded corners under the same hostas every July. You don't need to treat your whole garden. You need to interrupt the highways. And borax, because it's a mineral and not a liquid that breaks down in sunlight, stays effective in dry, protected spots for months. Some Oregon State Extension work on borate persistence in protected indoor cracks has shown effectiveness past a full year from a single application. A single application? Try getting that out of a spray can. Here's what to do this weekend on a garden you already love. Take a turkey baster, the cheap plastic kind from the discount shop. Fill it with dry borax powder. Walk your foundation slowly and puff small amounts into every crack, every weep hole, every gap where the cladding meets the slab, every spot where a utility line enters the house. You're not coating anything. You're laying down a dust line that crawling insects have to cross. They cross it, they pick it up, they're done. For your garden beds, sprinkle a light dusting, and I mean light, a teaspoon per square meter. No more around the base of plants where slugs and woodlice congregate. Do not put it directly on the soil where you grow vegetables, and do not water it in. Borax is a salt. In high concentrations in soil, it will absolutely hurt your plants. In a light dusting at the perimeter of a slug-prone bed, in dry weather, it controls the slugs and breaks down naturally over the season into boron, which is actually a trace nutrient most American soils are slightly deficient in. The University of Florida IFAS publications on micronutrients have noted boron deficiencies showing up in tomatoes, broccoli, and beetroot across the Southeast for decades. So used correctly in tiny amounts, you're solving 2 problems with 1 box. That word correctly is doing a lot of work. Let me be specific so you don't hurt anything you love. Keep borax mixtures away from pets and small children. It's far less toxic than commercial pesticides, but it's not sweets. And a curious dog will lap up a sweet syrup if you leave it open on the floor. Use the jar lid with cotton wool ball method, or tuck bait stations behind appliances, under sinks, on top of the fridge. Places paws and little hands don't go. Never spread borax on a lawn you want to keep green at lawn coverage rates. It will burn grass and stunt trees. We are talking about targeted surgical use: cracks, trails, bait stations, perimeter dusting. That's it. Do it that way and you will not believe the silence that settles over your house in about 2 weeks. But here is what nobody tells you, and this is the part that took me the longest to figure out. The reason most people try borax once and give up is that they treat the symptom and not the source. They kill the ants in the kitchen, and a month later, there are ants in the bathroom. They were never the same colony. There were two colonies the whole time. So if you do this, do it everywhere at once on the same weekend. Front of the house, back of the house, garage, basement, shed, under the decking, all of it. One weekend, one box. You are not chasing pests anymore. You are closing the whole map. And then there is the finale, the part I had to dig the deepest to find. In 1948, the United States Department of Agriculture published a technical bulletin. I'll spare you the number, but it's in the agricultural archives if you ever want to look it up, describing what they called a powder bellows method for borax application in rural homes that didn't have access to commercial exterminators. Farm wives across the Midwest and the South used it for decades. It was so effective and so cheap that when the commercial pesticide industry exploded in the 1950s and 60s, this method essentially vanished from the public mind. It wasn't outlawed. It wasn't dangerous. It was simply forgotten because there was no money in reminding anybody. Here it is. Mix 2 parts borax with 1 part icing sugar. The soft kind, sift them together through a fine kitchen sieve until they're completely combined. The icing sugar does something granulated sugar can't. It is so fine that it clings to insect bodies the same way the borax does. And the insect can't separate one from the other when it grooms. It eats both every time. Now take that mixture and using either an old turkey baster, a clean, empty, squeezy mustard bottle, or a small hand bellows if you happen to have one in the garage. Puff it as a fine cloud into the back of every cupboard, into the gap behind the dishwasher, into the void under the kitchen sink, into the corners of the larder and along the top plate of your basement walls where they meet the floor joists. You are not making piles. You are leaving a fine, almost invisible film of dust. Insects walk through it. They cannot avoid it. They cannot detect it. They cannot evolve around it. That mixture in protected interior locations has been documented in extension research to remain effective for over 12 months from a single application. 12 months from a mixture that cost you all in less than 50 cents per treated home. That is what the farm wives knew in 1948. That is what got buried under 60 years of television adverts for spray cans. That is what I wish somebody had told me before I wrote 30 years of checks to a man in a white van. I want you to think about something for a second. Every time you've stood in the pesticide aisle at the superstore squinting at labels, comparing prices, wondering which jug to trust, somebody made a decision a long time ago that you would stand there, that you would not know about the box in your utility room, that you would pay $10 instead of 3 cents per application. That is not an accident. That is a business model. And the only way it stops is one homeowner at a time figuring out what's already on the shelf. You didn't lose this knowledge. It was quietly taken from you, one marketing budget at a time, and replaced with something more expensive that works less well. You're not learning something new today. You're getting something back. Something your grandmother probably used without thinking twice about it in a kitchen that didn't have a single ant in it because she knew what was in the blue and yellow box. If you're the kind of person who refuses to keep overpaying for what a $3 mineral already does better, and if you've watched this far you are, then do me the one favor I asked at the top. Drop your state in the comments, just the state. I read them. I tailor what comes next based on what I see and tell me which pest is the worst one on your property right now in 1 or 2 words. Ants, cockroaches, slugs, fleas, wasps, whatever it is, because next week I'm putting together the regional breakdown and I want yours included. Subscribing isn't just supporting me, it's joining a group of folks, mostly people who've owned their homes for 20 or 30 or 40 years, who are quietly putting back into practice the things that worked before any of us got talked out of them. And next time I'm going to show you the one common kitchen ingredient, not borax, something even cheaper, something you almost certainly threw out this week without thinking about it, that will keep deer, rabbits, and squirrels out of a vegetable patch for an entire season. One application, no fence, no spray. I tested it on my own tomatoes last summer after a stag wiped out half the row, and I haven't lost a single fruit since. I'll see you in that one. Before I go, though, I want to leave you with a few more things worth knowing, because the comments on the last borax video I posted made it clear that a lot of you are sitting on questions nobody's answered straight. So let me answer them straight. First question I got the most. Is borax the same thing as boric acid? No, they're cousins. Borax is sodium tetraborate, the raw mineral form mined out of the ground in places like Boron, California, where the U.S. Borax mine has been pulling it out of the desert since 1925. Boric acid is what you get when you process borax with a stronger acid. It's a refined derivative, a finer white powder, and it's slightly more potent against insects per gram. Both work. Boric acid is what most commercial cockroach baits use because it's easier to mill into a fine dust. Borax is what your grandmother used because it sat right there on the laundry shelf and cost almost nothing. For the recipes I've been walking you through, the sugar bait, the perimeter line, the slug ring, borax works just fine. If you already have boric acid in the house, cut the quantities roughly in half and you'll get the same result. Second question, does it really work on fleas? Yes, and there's actual data on this one. Back in 1994, a research team at the University of California published findings showing that fine borat powders worked into carpet fibers reduced flea populations by over 90% within 30 days. And the effect held for nearly a year as long as the carpet wasn't shampooed. The mechanism is the same one I described earlier. It desiccates the larvae before they ever mature into the jumping adults that bite your ankles. The professional pest control industry knows this. There are companies right now charging $300 to $500 to come into your house and apply a board treatment to your carpets and skirting boards. The product they're using is functionally borax with a marketing budget. You can do the same job with a flour sifter and a box from the laundry aisle for under $4. Sprinkle, work it in with a stiff broom, leave it for 48 hours, then vacuum thoroughly. Repeat in 2 weeks to catch the next hatch. That's it. That's the whole treatment. Third question, and this is the one that worries me most when I see it. Is it safe around kids and pets? Here's the honest answer. Borax is not something you want a toddler eating by the handful, and it's not something you want a dog licking off the kitchen floor. The lethal dose for a small dog is somewhere in the range of 3 to 4 g per kilogram of body weight, which sounds scary until you realize a baited station with half a teaspoon tucked behind the fridge is nowhere near that quantity, and the dog would have to find it, dig it out, and eat all of it. Use the same common sense you'd use with a mousetrap or a bottle of washing up liquid under the sink. Put baits where pets and children can't reach them, inside a folded index card, behind appliances, up on a windowsill, taped to the underside of a cupboard. Outdoors, keep the powder lines along foundation walls and garden edges where the dog isn't lying down. Done with that small amount of attention, borax is dramatically safer than the synthetic pyrethroids and neonicotinoids being sprayed by the gallon out of the hose-end applicators sold at every superstore in the country. Fourth question, will it kill the bees? No, and this matters. Borax in the dry powdered form, used the way I'm telling you to use it, stays on the ground and inside structures. It doesn't drift, it doesn't aerosolize, it doesn't end up in nectar or pollen. Compare that to the neonicotinoid imidacloprid, which has been documented in over 40 peer-reviewed studies as a primary driver of pollinator collapse, and which is the active ingredient in most of the systemic insecticides being sold to homeowners right now, under cheerful green packaging with pictures of flowers on the front. Borax targets crawling pests at ground level. Your bees, your butterflies, your hummingbirds, they never encounter it. That alone for me is reason enough to have made the switch a decade ago and never looked back. If this story changes how you look at the simple minerals in your home, please subscribe and like the video. We are uncovering the history they tried to bury. Let's reclaim the future of our households together. The next treasure of forgotten wisdom will be opened very soon.